And I thank the Chairman. Thank you, Secretary.
Good to see you.
Before I begin, just to make a comment on one of your comments when I was walking in the room, with regard to AIG, saying that there was a gap with regard to coverage, not coverage, but gap with regard to authority and regulation there. We've had a number of panels in financial services look at this, and the bottom line is, the takeaway that I've always heard is it's not a gap in authority, not a gap in regulation, that there were regulators there in place, but what they actually admitted to was they had the authority, they had the personnel, but you know what? They just missed it. They weren't looking in the right places, and it was just an error on the part of personnel. And
it may have been a gap in terms of capability when you look at the multiple regulators.
That's probably a good way to phrase it. One of the things that you have said, and others, and Secretary Bernanke as well, said, is that what we needed here was resolution authority. And that's what we need to answer her question going forward, is resolution authority as well. But here's a question I'll pose for you hypothetically. Had we had resolution authority prior to the AIG situation, can you think and explain to me how it would be different? And I'll just posit two thoughts to you. If you had the resolution authority and they tried to move in and to try to firm in a more quicker manner, well, we know right now there is no real market out right there, and that would, the same reason we're not doing it right now, is put a larger burden on the taxpayer, right? And if you did what they're doing now, essentially is saying we're going to do it out over a period of time, there's still the threat of the problem over it. So help me understand why anything would be different significantly to the taxpayer and to the structure had we had a wind-down authority in place prior to the AIG situation.
With AIG, it was necessary to keep the current. The company didn't go through bankruptcy.
Right.
Kept the current corporate structure.
Right.
Worked within the legal framework.
Right.
The one thing that is similar is that the Fed made a loan which is going to be repaid as pieces of the company are sold. But since I don't know, in terms of AIG,
yeah,
my role was in giving the Fed support as they made this decision. But once the action was taken, I had no dealing, so I just don't know the details. And I think probably the Fed would be better to answer that question for you in terms of what they're doing now and what they might do differently with the resolution authority.
Okay, I only posit the question because I do know you were not on the scene after the fact, but I just posit the question because I know you have said in the past, and here too, I think that we need the wind-down authority, but I'm not really seeing, and I haven't got my hands around from other witnesses as well, what would have been different in that situation. And now we have the situation, as you well know, with the CIT. Looking like that they are not going to be able to get a bailout, if you will. And so haven't we already set up the precipice, set up the situation, maybe going all the way back with Bear Stearns, that you create the conundrum of them saying that we look to the government to bail out, and under the administration proposals will say we're only going to bail out the Tier 1 entities, and CIT apparently just doesn't fall into that category, so they're not going to get the bailout. So you have a disincentive now. You have or a disservice to the taxpayer and disincentive to the taxpayer that you're going to encourage companies like that in the future. Say, boy, I better get into that Tier 1 situation again, or else I'm going to fall into the CIT situation. Isn't that the problem with the administration's proposal?
Well, I don't have all of the facts in terms of what has happened. When I was here, the regulators made CIT a bank holding company. They came in with a regulatory recommendation to Treasury. We funded them out of TARP. I have lost touch. I don't know what's happened, but I understand the issue, the conundrum you've laid out, and that is why really the only answer is we need to exit from all of these programs as soon as we can.
Yeah, but my fear is that and my question to you would be, would we not, under the administration's proposal, and I know you spend some time looking at these things, basically perpetuating that situation going forward? In other words, if we set the administration's plan into place and we begin to identify certain entities as being too big to fail, the Tier 1 institutions, then the CITs of the world, and I know you may not be up to speed on, neither am I, on the particulars right there, But the CITs of the world will say, we want to get into that situation in the future, and that's the basic underlying flaw in the administration's proposal, that you perpetuate the problem. Would you agree with that?
I do agree that in one thing, that we don't want to move toward a situation in this country where we have certain organizations that are too big to fail and everyone else can fail. Right. And we want to get to a situation where no one is too big to fail. Now, I don't know enough about the CIT to jump to the same conclusion you are about that, but I understand the dilemma you're pointing to.
Yeah. Gentleman's time has expired.